this is thing I'm going to pass on to CIS coaches one at a time with two that I know, and then to the global population. So it's going to be about 120 CIS coaches because it's stuff at that highest level that the NHL is doing that you talked about. Can you just elaborate on that? Because I don't know if any of the guys here have seen it, but I'm certainly going to forward your email.
So Wally, is this the one about finding space working off the net?
Yes.
Gotcha. So I'll put a link into the chat real quick for everyone if you haven't seen it. Literally named Finding Space Working Off the Net. General concept here is space is hard to come by. How do we find it? How do we create it? And this is stuff that higher level rings a lot truer than maybe the lower level, where you're going to be able to just have people switch off their focus mentally and find space and not really have to work for it. But obviously at the higher levels, it becomes a lot tougher. Checks are a lot more aware. They're much more engaged all the time. You're playing hockey 24/7 rather than whenever your team gets the puck. So it's how do we create and find and get the space? Really, it's difficult unless you're finding ways to utilize your teammates and bring them in, or utilize the only static structure on the rink, which is the net. So how do we run our checks, our opponents into traffic? How do we run them into the net? How do we find the space between coverages, which is the real concept here, is how do we find space? And it really comes down to, if you got a man on man, we got to run them into traffic or off the net. If we've got more zone, we get a lot. We can find space by going between coverages, whether that is that awkward space behind the net or some spaces that you can find between the defensive structure that gets put in place by coaches.
Greg, I really love your video highlights, the demonstration of them by those players with your voiceover. And I find reading your written description and then repeatedly looking at the video clip, like it reruns, so I can read, go back and look at it. And I really believe any player that looks at that, listens to it, sees it, and reads it, they're going to do it. They're going to experiment with it. To me, it's just like YouTube. These kids are practicing skills on YouTube that they see that they're starting to do on the ice. So the Michigan, that's what happened because somebody did it and everybody sees it now. So everybody's trying it now. And I really think that offensive tactical stuff you're putting on to create time and space and use those areas of the ice, it's brilliant. So I want to compliment you for that. I'm doing everything in my power to circulate and make them aware of it. But those video links are priceless. If players look at them and coaches look at them, I don't think I would deliberately practice them. I think your elite players at the college level, they would just do that stuff on the ice.
Agreed. And I feel like that's one of the problems I run into with a lot of young coaches, is like they want to teach every little detail of the game. And it's like, you don't have time or the ability, and you're taking away from areas that should be prioritized. So that's good to hear that you believe that it can be just taken kind of from video and from concept, and players can try it in their games within their team practices where they don't have to specifically go into this or design an activity or drill. So that's wonderful. And I like how you enjoy actually having to rewatch the video over and over again, because I think particularly for players who may not have watched as much film as us coaches have or want to watch, they're able to actually start picking up an eye for the game, an eye for the details, rather than some of these videos where I see a ton on the screen where you're pointing out this and you're look here, look there, but they've got to develop their own eye for it. So it's a big thing that I do is I try to almost do nothing, allow here's what I'm seeing, and then allowing people to find their own eye for the game and own eye for the detail within it. So I'm glad that that's going well, and thanks Wally for pushing that out and getting it beyond just my few little people that follow me. And it's great to hear that's connecting well with you and others.
I just want to share with you at the level, our level, and I'll mention Tom's team specifically, he dealt with U13 girls. So, Craig, we aren't worried about creating offensive low zone space. But what Tom did, he worked on forward to forward offensive puck movement behind the net, finding the open player in the slot. And they did that. U13 girls. It was phenomenal. He also worked on evasive tight turns in a deliberate way. So I'm more concerned of getting coaches to teach those fundamental skills a little better, and then that ability to go into hockey sense and hockey IQ and thinking and applying those skills. With Tom's team, his games concept, his special rules in scrimmaging, they picked it up. And I think that I've been off this call a little bit talking to Samantha Holmes, who's on the executive in Girls Hockey Calgary. And Samantha's a former national team player candidate, and they get it. Anybody who's played with the national team gets it. And Greg, we were talking about stick length, I think, before you joined. Sam Holmes emailed me last night, texted me during the Canadian game against Switzerland. Sarah Nurse's stick is too long. She spotted it. And that's where I'm at, Craig. But I'm also at the other end of the spectrum, and it's the first time I connected the dots with the CIS is the level that they can look at it. I don't even know if the Western League coaches or players would appreciate and apply it as much as the CIS player, where they're student athletes and maybe they look at video more. But video learning, to me, the experiment that Daryl Belfry did with his superstars out in Florida, where they looked at Patrick Kane talk through his shift, it led to conversations and questions, and it engaged them in viewing the game and seeing the game, not through the coach's eye, but through their eyes. And they see so much more than we do. And I think that's where we are going to be students of the players now.
There's a big difference between knowledge of the game and knowledge in the game, and bridging that gap, I think, is where you're seeing some of the top end coaches and facilitators really driving a lot of value for their players. It's great to see it from video and 1,000-foot view, but how can you in real time think through a shift, build a mental map, so when you're actually playing, you're able to make these reads in real time when the game is so fast and requires a lot of read and react rather than being able to think through exactly, oh, I'm going to do this because of that, and that. It's just too fast. So how do we create knowledge in the game rather than just knowledge of the game? Obviously, knowledge of the game helps, but we need to translate that to knowledge in the game itself. And when it comes to equipment, I'd also love to throw out there, shorter sticks are great, but we should also maybe go down an eyelet or two when we're tying up our skates, so we have a little more ankle bend, because I find improper or poor knee bend is usually actually all about inability to really move the ankle and get ankle bend.
Yeah, we've talked about that a while ago, the top three eyelets being looser, or maybe even not even doing them up. And I'll share this story, Greg. I don't think you've heard of it, but Thomas Pacino, who's coach, Thomas is coach in the Czech Republic.
Yep.
Jungle Jim Hunter is a skier from Canada who grew up in Saskatchewan, where there weren't any hills, and he became a world-class skier. But he brought up the concept of skiing without your ski boots tightened on, so you could feel your edges. So Thomas, and I have a video of this edited, of a player doing really difficult pivoting movements with loose skates. And Jerome McGinley worked with Thomas, and Thomas did the loose skates concept with him. And after that, Jerome did all his warm-ups before the game. He did the warm-up with loose skates. because you get to feel your edges, the tactile nature of going up your body through your feet and the edges of your skates. So thanks for bringing that up, because we can talk about it at, you might need them really tight to be able to just stand up and learn to skate. But once you learn and achieve a level of competence, we're talking about just making them that much better with that much mastery of their edges. So good point.
Yeah, another piece
Well,
with
it's
that,
good.
and I got to run after this, would just be even like being able to slow down and do things slow before you speed it up and do it fast. Because a lot of people can take their momentum and do things, but as soon as you slow it down, their technique and form and ability really falls off. Sorry, Jordan, got to run. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Okay, take care, Greg. Thanks for getting on.
Thanks, Greg.
I was just going to add that it was a good comparison that you talked about putting the skiing and hockey together, because these newest skates I find are like ski boots. I got a new pair of skates this year because I got a promotion, and so I tried a brand new pair of ski boots is what they felt like to me.
You froze
I'm
up.
not hearing anybody here.
Yeah, Jordan froze up.
Jordan, you froze up, so you'll try again getting back on. But anybody experimented with skate laces, not doing eyelets over the years, and any other things like that? Mike? Turn your speaker on, Mike.
I must have been unmuted the whole time. Yeah, I used to run a lot of skating classes back in the, a long time ago, where we'd have this kids skate with their skates basically just tied enough so they'd stay on their feet. And that was an old figure skating trick. Just, it was all about, feeling your edges and being able to pivot and not allowing your ankles to, you have to control your ankle flexion and your knee flexion and your own it's almost like it's hard enough to balance on skates as it is for an individual. Now, now try to balance on skates that aren't, that your foot has to adjust to, and your weight transfer has to accommodate for. So it's a, it's not for everyone, but I always thought it was a good challenge for the kids, for sure, that I worked with, especially the really good skaters, like the ones that knew their edges were really the people I love watching the most do that. But if Jordan gets back on, I think we dropped him, huh? Because he bought CCMs, that's why.
I think the loose eyelets and or top couple of eyelets or whatever, definitely a skill acquisition required. I know that I never would have been able to, I don't think I'd been able to adapt to that. So the earlier, it's same as we're talking about the other stuff, the earlier you sort of introduce that idea to young kids, probably the better, because it'd be a hard thing to change on the fly once you're older, I think. Perhaps doable, but
Well, I think it's one of those things where if you incorporate it into an older player, it's more of a challenge of like me, like I've always, like I never used to wear socks skating. Like it was always a big, I liked my foot. Like I didn't like tube socks. I'm not a tube sock guy. So now that they have such thin socks, I mean, it's great now with the skate socks are so thin, they feel like you're not really wearing much either. But that's just that feeling that you're controlling the blade and you feel it. The control is, I think, what makes, the great skaters greater, right? They have the ability to feel where their edge actually is on the ice. And I think when you take the ability to extract, like if you can make the tuck of the blade and the blade feel like it's being controlled directly by your foot and not by the boot, it really does, give a whole different level of control for the player. That's why I was saying the higher level kid, I like watching because they're not frustrated by it. They actually adjust so fast to be able to control their skate without it even being tied. They're literally riding on their blade with their own foot, which is impressive.
Mhm.
They don't want them to trip, obviously, and break their ankle because those boots are so stiff now. There's no play in there. Like it's like you hit it. It's a stiff boot.
On the call right